The asphalt in South Central doesn't just hold heat, it holds memory. It is a slate where every scratch, every scuff of a sneaker, and every flick of a wrist is a line of code. We are standing on a corner where the air smells of exhaust and old grease, watching a teenager lean against a brick wall. To a passerby, he is a portrait of urban boredom. To the state, he is a potential statistic. But to the block, he is a lighthouse. He isn't speaking, yet he is screaming. His hat is tilted exactly 4 degrees to the left. His shoelaces are patterned in a ladder weave that ignores the traditional eyelets. His fingers are twitching in a rhythmic, staccato dance against his thigh. He is broadcasting on a frequency that most of the world has forgotten how to tune into, a lethal grammar where a single syntax error results in a funeral. This is the great paradox of the American street. In a world where survival depends on evading the watchful eye of the police, the inhabitants have created the loudest visual culture on Earth. They have traded the safety of anonymity for the prestige of the signal. They have built a language so dense and so specific that it acts as both a badge of honor and a self-imposed cage. By the time this young man finishes his broadcast, he has identified his set, declared his enemies, and staked a claim to the very air he breathes. He has also, without realizing it, handed the district attorney every piece of evidence needed to bury him. The secret language designed to protect the collective is the very tool the state uses to dismantle it. The geography of the block is not defined by GPS coordinates, but by the invisible lines of linguistic and visual demarcation. Imagine a map of Los Angeles. The 110 freeway isn't just a vein of transit. It is a reinforced concrete border wall separating different dialects of the same violent tongue. To the west, the Rollin 60s neighborhood Crips claim a territory where the number 60 is more than a digit. It is a sacred geometry. To the east, the bounty hunter Bloods in Nickerson Gardens operate within a color palette that treats the shade of red as a religious obligation. These physical barriers are reinforced by psychological ones. The architecture of the housing project, the narrow corridors of the Imperial Courts or the sprawling complexes of Jordan Downs, serves as a laboratory for this evolving grammar. Every wall is a chalkboard. Every t-shirt is a flag. The block is a machine that requires constant maintenance through communication. If the communication stops, the territory dissolves. Therefore, the frequency must remain active at all times. This is not a choice. It is a structural necessity of street economics. Without the code, there is no brand. Without the brand, there is no control over the market. Look closely at the hands. This is stacking. It is the cryptography of the flesh. When a member of the Rollin 60s encounters a stranger, the interrogation begins before a word is uttered. The hands move with the speed of a card sharp. The thumb and forefinger form a circle. The remaining 3 fingers flare out, a 6, then a shift. The fingers interlock to form an N and an H. This isn't a greeting. It is a high-speed identification system designed to filter friend from foe in the time it takes for a car to slow down for a drive-by. Stacking is a visual dialect that bypasses the ears entirely. It is designed for the high-noise, high-risk environment of the street corner where verbal communication is often impossible or dangerous. But there is a darker side to this manual alphabet: hostile stacking. A rival member from a blood set might see these signs and respond not with his own set signal, but by throwing down the Crip sign. He takes that same 6 or that same NH and points it toward the gutter. This is a formal declaration of war. It is a linguistic execution. In the mechanics of the street, to disrespect the sign is to invite the bullet. The hands that were just used to eat a meal or hug a mother are now transformed into weapons of semiotic warfare. A midnight blue sedan rounds the corner of Slauson Avenue. The driver is 22, but his eyes have the flat, matte finish of a man who has seen 100 years of Friday nights. He sees a group of teenagers on the sidewalk. His eyes don't look at their faces. They look at their hands. One boy, barely 14, sees the car and flashes a T for Tremont Street. The driver's jaw tightens. He doesn't recognize the kid, but he recognizes the grammar. He reaches into the glove box. There is no shouting, no heated argument about perceived slights. There is only the recognition of a hostile signal and the mechanical response of a 9mm slide racking back. The boy on the sidewalk is still smiling, proud of his mastery of the code, unaware that his hands have just signed his own death warrant. The car speeds off, leaving behind the smell of burnt rubber and the echoing pop-pop that serves as the period at the end of a very short sentence. Across the street, a woman in her 50s pulls a plastic crate of groceries into her apartment. She heard the shots, but she didn't look up. To her, the lethal grammar of the street is a background noise, like the hum of a refrigerator. She is a non-player, a civilian caught in the crossfire of a war she didn't start. She knows that if she looks, she becomes a witness. If she becomes a witness, she becomes part of the code. She has taught her children to look at the ground, to ignore the stacking, to pretend they are blind to the neon-bright signals of the sets. But she knows the truth. The code is infectious. Her son is already starting to tilt his hat. He is already starting to avoid the letter C when he writes his name in his school notebook. She is watching her child being slowly translated into a language she cannot speak, a language that leads only to the graveyard or the Twin Towers Correctional Facility. The warfare extends into the very alphabet we use to communicate. This is linguistic warfare, an orthographic purge that seeks to erase the enemy from the dictionary. Consider the Piru Street Bloods. For a Piru, the letter C is a contaminant. It is the first letter of their mortal enemy, the Crips. To use it is to give power to the rival. Therefore, the C must be destroyed. It is replaced with a B. They don't go to the store to get something cool. They get something bull. They don't get crazy. They get brazy. They are bickin' back being bull. This isn't just slang. It is a systematic restructuring of the English language to reflect a battlefield. This erasure is most visible in graffiti and digital communication. A Blood member will write a message and, whenever a C must be used, they will cross it out with a defiant line or follow it immediately with a K. This suffix, CK, stands for Crip Killer. Conversely, a Crip will write BK for Blood Killer. Every text message, every Instagram caption, every tag on a freeway overpass is a constant death threat embedded in regular speech. The language is no longer a tool for connection. It is a minefield where a single typo can be interpreted as a sign of weakness or an act of treason. The street has its own uniform, but it isn't found in a military surplus store. It is found in the local mall, hidden in plain sight. This is subversive branding. In the 1980s and 90s, the footwear of choice for many Crip sets wasn't chosen for the cushioning or the arch support. They wore British Knight sneakers. To the average consumer, BK was just another brand. To the street, the initials stood for Blood Killer. Wearing those shoes was a silent, walking provocation. It was a way to broadcast your allegiance to everyone you passed on the sidewalk. The Bloods, never to be outdone in the theater of symbols, countered by adopting Adidas. They didn't care about the German heritage of the brand. They reinterpreted the acronym, "All day I destroy all 7 ones." This was a specific, targeted strike against the 71st Street Crip sets. They took a multi-billion-dollar corporate identity and hollowed it out, filling it with their own local lethal meaning. They did the same with sports teams. A Pittsburgh Pirates hat isn't about baseball in certain parts of Jersey or California. The P stands for Piru. A Georgetown Hoyas starter jacket isn't about college basketball. The G represents the gangster disciples. This apparel as uniform allows for a sophisticated friend or foe identification system that functions across a crowded street or a dark nightclub without a single word being spoken. It is a visual shorthand that turns every retail outlet into an armory. Think about the psychological toll of this linguistic ghettoization. When a young man spends his entire formative years training his brain to delete the letter C, when he spends his hours mastering the intricate geometry of stacking, he is performing a social amputation. He is cutting himself off from the rest of the world. By the time he is 20, he is culturally unrecognizable to the legal world. If he walks into a job interview, he doesn't just bring his resume. He brings his lethal grammar. The way he sits, the way he speaks, The very way his brain processes the alphabet is now fundamentally hostile to the structures of the straight world. He has become a citizen of a country that doesn't exist on any map, a country with its own language and its own laws. This code acts as a permanent psychological barrier. It ensures that he remains on the block, because the outside world can no longer understand him, and more tragically, he can no longer understand the outside world. He is trapped in a feedback loop of his own signals. The economics of the block demand this level of specialization. In the drug trade, clarity is a liability. If you are selling weight on a corner in Compton, you cannot afford to be explicit. You use the silent frequency. A nod of the head, a specific whistle, a hand placed in a pocket. These are the spreadsheets of the street. They track inventory, signal police presence, and authorize transactions. The hierarchy of the set is maintained through these signals. An original gangster, OG, doesn't need to scream to be heard. His silence is his power. The young soldiers are the ones who are loud, the ones who overstack, the ones who broadcast the hardest. They are trying to prove their mastery of the grammar. But the OG knows that the most effective code is the one that is understood only by those who need to know. He moves with a quiet, lethal economy. He has nothing to prove because he owns the frequency. In a small apartment, a mother sits at a kitchen table, looking at her son's social media profile. She sees the photos of him with his friends. They are all stacking. They are all wearing the uniform. To her, it looks like a foreign language she can't translate, but she feels the weight of it in her chest. She sees the CK in his bio. She knows what it means, even if she tries to tell herself it's just a trend. She sees the subversive branding on his feet. Every photo is a piece of evidence. Every brazy he types is a nail in a coffin. She wants to scream at him to speak normal, to wear normal clothes, to stop using his hands like weapons. But she knows it's too late. The block has already taught him its grammar. He has been inducted into the silent frequency, and in that world, his mother's voice is just static. She is the collateral damage of a linguistic war, a woman losing her son to a syntax she cannot break. The arrival of the digital age has only amplified the lethal grammar. In the past, a tag on a wall stayed in the neighborhood. Today, a tag on Instagram reaches the entire world. Social media has turned the silent frequency into a global broadcast. Gang members now use cyberstacking, posting videos where they diss rival sets through complex hand signals and choreographed movements. This digital footprint is a goldmine for the state. Law enforcement agencies now employ linguistic analysts and gang experts whose entire job is to decipher the silent frequency. They use RICO, racketeer-influenced and corrupt organizations, laws to turn a collection of bool and brazy texts into a conspiracy charge. The very codes meant to provide identity and protection are now the primary tools of mass incarceration. The machine of the block provides the blueprint for its own destruction. The loudness of the street culture has become its ultimate vulnerability. The unifying theory of the block is that the machine cannot be stopped because it is self-repairing. The lethal grammar is not just a way of speaking. It is a way of being. It is a response to a world that has systematically ignored and silenced these communities. When you are told you don't exist, you make yourself visible in the loudest, most aggressive way possible. You create a language that the authorities cannot understand, but you make it so visual that they cannot ignore it. This is the tragic irony. The silent frequency is a scream for recognition that results in a prison sentence. The lethal grammar is a pursuit of status that ends in an anonymous grave. The block is a predator that feeds on the creativity of its youth, turning their linguistic genius into a weapon used against them. As the sun sets over the projects, the frequency stays active. The shadows grow long, and the stacking becomes more frantic as the night shift begins. A new generation of 14-year-olds is out there right now, learning how to delete the letter C from their vocabulary. They are learning which sneakers represent a threat and which ones represent a home. They are being inducted into a world where the grammar is lethal and the syntax is a death trap. They think they are becoming part of something powerful, something secret. They don't realize they are just becoming data points in a system that was designed to consume them. The silent frequency continues to hum, a low-grade vibration of violence and pride that echoes through the concrete canyons of America. The game is rigged, not by the rules, but by the language itself. The tale from the block is never just about the violence. It is about the tragic beauty of a people who turned their oppression into a code, only to find that the code was a cage. The street demands absolute silence to avoid the law, but its heart is too loud to stay quiet. Every gesture is a broadcast. Every spelling choice is a manifesto. And every young man standing on a corner is a storyteller, even if he never says a word. We are left to wonder if there is a way to break the frequency, to find a grammar that leads to life instead of death. But for now, the asphalt continues to hold its heat, and the silent frequency continues to broadcast its lethal, beautiful, and heartbreaking message to a world that is finally, tragically, starting to listen. The transmission never stops. It only shifts into the infrared. By the time the streetlights buzz to life, the frequency has moved from the corners to the digital ether. This is the era of the cyberblock. In the physical world, a set might control 3 square blocks of Brooklyn or a specific housing cluster in Chicago's South Side. But online, their reach is limitless. They are no longer just broadcasting to the rival set across the boulevard. They are broadcasting to the state, the scouts, and the next generation of recruits globally. This digital expansion hasn't diluted the lethal grammar. It has codified it into a permanent, searchable database of self-incrimination. The mechanics of this digital transition rely on the visual taunt. We are looking at a drill music video not as entertainment but as a tactical document. The camera movements are jagged, mimicking the adrenaline of a foot chase. The protagonist isn't just rapping. He is performing a ritual of linguistic erasure in real time. He holds a stack of $100 bills to his ear like a phone, while his other hand systematically dissects the air. He drops the rakes, a gesture aimed at the folk nation, and then quickly transitions into a K sign. This isn't choreography. It's a geotagged threat. By filming this in front of a specific bodega on 63rd Street, he is providing the state with time, location, intent, and affiliation. The paradox deepens. To maintain clout in the digital economy, the member must provide the exact evidence required to remove him from the physical one. In a windowless room in a downtown precinct, a task force officer scrolls through a TikTok feed. He isn't looking for viral dances. He is an interpreter of the silent frequency. He watches a 15-second clip of a teenager in a red tracksuit. The kid doesn't say a word. He just points his camera at his feet, showing off a new pair of New Balance sneakers, then pans up to a pea hat. The officer logs it. To the algorithm, it's just another piece of fashion content. To the officer, the choice of the New Balance 990 model in that specific colorway, combined with the P4 Pyru, indicates a specific shift in the local hierarchy. The subversive branding has become a data point in a predictive policing algorithm. The street thinks it's using the internet to amplify its power, but the internet is actually a massive net, slowly closing around the block. Shift the lens to a classroom in East St. Louis. A 16-year-old girl sits in the back, her eyes glued to her screen. She isn't part of a set, but she is a fluent speaker of the grammar. She watches the drama unfold between rival sets like a soap opera. She sees the BK and CK suffixes in the comments section and knows which neighborhoods to avoid on her walk home. To her, this isn't gang culture. It's the weather. It is the atmospheric pressure she has to navigate every single day. She sees her classmates stacking in their profile pictures, trying to look brazy for the likes. She knows that for every like they get from a stranger, they are losing a piece of their future. She is a non-player who has been forced to become a linguistic expert just to survive the 10th grade. She knows that if she accidentally types a C in the wrong group chat, the consequences won't be a social media block, but a physical one. The street economics of the digital age have created a clout-to-casket pipeline. The more aggressive the signaling, the higher the digital engagement. High engagement leads to notoriety, which leads to street heat. This heat is a commodity that can be traded for protection or influence, but it has a massive overhead cost: survival. The hierarchy of the block now rewards the loudest broadcasters, which is a direct reversal of the old-school OG philosophy of moving in silence. The result is a high turnover rate of leadership. The generals of the block are no longer 40-year-old men who survived the crack era. They are 19-year-olds who went viral for a diss track where they used the lethal grammar to perfection. These young leaders are often dead or incarcerated within 18 months, replaced by the next speaker of the frequency. This leads us to the mechanical inevitability. The block cannot stop because the code has become synonymous with identity. If a blood member stops replacing C with B, he isn't just changing his spelling. He is committing social suicide. He is falling off. In the hyper-competitive market of the street, any sign of linguistic normalization is perceived as a sign of cooperation with the state or a loss of heart. The grammar is a one-way street. You can learn the code, you can master the syntax, but you can almost never unlearn it. Even those who get out, the ones who make it to the NFL, the music industry, or legitimate business, often find themselves reflexively stacking in photos or using the suffixes of their youth. The linguistic ghettoization is a permanent neurological rewiring. The collateral tragedy is found in the silent majority of the block. The grandfathers who remember when the colors meant something different. The shop owners who have to paint over the BK tags every Monday morning. And the children who think brazy is the correct spelling of the word. They are living in a linguistic war zone where the primary casualties are nuance and peace. The silent frequency drowns out the possibility of any other conversation. It prevents the community from speaking to the outside world in a way that doesn't trigger a defensive or carceral response. The language of the block has become a wall higher than any fence the state could ever build. As we look at the remnants of a tag on a rusted gate in North Philly, we see the CK crossed out and replaced with a BK. It is a conversation that has been happening for 40 years, written in the same lethal grammar. The players change, the sneakers change, the social media platforms change, but the syntax remains the same. It is a machine that produces the same result with terrifying efficiency: the removal of young men from their communities. The game doesn't want you to win. It just wants you to keep playing, keep signaling, and keep broadcasting until the signal finally goes flat. The silent frequency isn't a secret anymore. It's a siren, and it's leading everyone who follows it straight into the heart of the storm. The block is a graveyard of unwritten books and unspoken dreams, all sacrificed to a code that promised protection but delivered only visibility. The paradox is complete. The streets spoke so loudly that the world finally heard it, but instead of sending help, the world sent a bus to the county jail. The lethal grammar is a masterpiece of human ingenuity and a monument to human tragedy, a language that is beautiful in its complexity and horrific in its consequences. On the block, silence is no longer an option, but speaking is a death sentence. The silent frequency does not just broadcast identity, it manages the distribution of capital. To look at the block and see only chaos is to miss the rigid corporate structure beneath the surface. This is the tactical infrastructure of the set. In the upper echelons of the Bloods and Crips, leadership functions like a board of directors. Orders aren't whispered in dark alleys. They are coded into the very environment. A pair of sneakers hanging from a power line isn't a memorial. It's a no trespassing sign for rival distributors. A specific color of duct tape wrapped around a light pole indicates which product is currently available in the adjacent building. This is the visual ledger of an underground economy, a way of accounting that leaves no paper trail for the IRS but is perfectly legible to those on the payroll. Consider the lookout protocol. On a street in St. Louis, a 12-year-old sits on a stoop. He isn't holding a weapon. He isn't selling a substance. He is merely playing a game on his phone. But his position is strategic. He is the human firewall. Every time a car with tinted windows or a government-issued license plate enters the radius, he adjusts his posture. He might put on a hoodie. He might stand up and walk to the corner. This physical shift is a packet of data sent to the soldiers further down the block. By the time the police reach the target apartment, the silent frequency has already cleared the room. The economics of the block depend on this low-latency communication. If the firewall fails, the profit margins disappear into legal fees. The mechanics of tactical movements have evolved alongside the grammar. In the 90s, a drive-by was a blunt instrument. Today, it is a precision strike coordinated through encrypted apps and visual markers. We analyze the staging area, often a neutral territory like a 24-hour laundromat or a specific gas station. Here, the crash dummies, the youngest, most expendable members, receive their final instructions. They don't use names. They use call signs derived from the set's history. A member might be called 8-Ball or 4-Tray, names that double as coordinates or historical markers of the set's founding street. This linguistic dehumanization is necessary for the mechanics of violence. You aren't shooting a person. You are servicing a target identified by the grammar. The scene shifts to a hospital waiting room at 3 a.m. A mother sits in a plastic chair, her hands trembling. Her son was the firewall. He was the 12-year-old who missed a signal. He didn't see the black SUV turn the corner because he was distracted by a notification on his screen. The silent frequency he was supposed to broadcast failed, and the soldiers he was protecting blamed him for the subsequent raid. This is the debt of the block. In the streets economy, a mistake isn't a performance review. It's a physical liability. She watches the doctors move behind frosted glass, knowing that even if he survives, he is in the red. He owes the set for the lost product, the lost time, and the lost prestige. The collateral lens reveals that the grammar of the street doesn't just kill. It indebts. It creates a cycle of generational peonage, where children are born into a linguistic and financial deficit they can never repay. This leads us to the permanent record. In the digital age, the state has transitioned from reactive policing to linguistic forensics. The FBI's Gang Intelligence Unit now uses AI to map the orthographic war. They have software that flags the replacement of C with B across millions of social media posts. They track the frequency of CK and BK hashtags to predict where the next flashpoint will occur. The block thinks it is speaking in code, but it is actually training the state's AI. Every time a member stacks in a video, he is providing a biometric profile and a set affiliation that is stored in a permanent, searchable database. The silent frequency has become the state's most effective surveillance tool. The very thing that provides the member with clout provides the prosecutor with intent. The unifying theory of the block survival is the machine of exclusion. The outside world views the silent frequency as a choice, but for those inside, it is the only viable software. If you grow up in a neighborhood where the legal economy has completely withdrawn, the lethal grammar is the only language that puts food on the table. The game continues because it is the only employer that doesn't check your background or care if you can spell crazy with a C. It is a predatory inclusive system. It welcomes the marginalized, gives them a language, gives them a uniform, and then systematically uses that language and uniform to ensure they can never leave. The block doesn't just produce violence. It produces ineligibility. It makes its inhabitants ineligible for the straight world, leaving them with no choice but to double down on the code. We stand again on that same corner. The sun is a bruised purple on the horizon. The teenager against the wall is gone, replaced by another, younger version of the same signal. The silent frequency is humming. Car slows down. A hand reaches out. A signal is exchanged. The lethal grammar is being written in real time. A tragedy in 10,000 parts, played out across the grid of the American city. The game is not a sport. It is a metabolic process. It consumes youth, converts it into clout, and excretes statistics. As the viewer, you are now tuned into the frequency. You see the signs. You see the subversive branding. You see the linguistic warfare. The question is no longer, what does it mean? But how does it stop? The harsh conclusion is that it doesn't. Not as long as the block is the only place where these voices are heard. Until the straight world offers a language that is louder, more lucrative, and more meaningful than the silent frequency, the lethal grammar will remain the mother tongue of the streets. The tale from the block is a story of a broadcast that never ends, a signal that transcends the physical and becomes a permanent part of the American psyche. We are all living in the radius of the frequency, whether we choose to hear it or not. The silent frequency does not originate on the corner. It is perfected in the concrete tomb of the American carceral system. This is the carceral foundry. When a member of a set is removed from the street and placed into the California Department of Corrections or the federal system, the grammar does not stop. It mutates. In environments like Pelican Bay or San Quentin, where even the visual stacking of hands can result in an immediate stint in the SHU, Security Housing Unit, the language goes subterranean. This is the birth of the kite. Microscopic notes written in a script so small they require a magnifying glass to read, hidden in the seams of clothing or swallowed to bypass a strip search. But more importantly, this is where the Wilshire dialect of the code is forged. In prison, the lethal grammar becomes a survival requirement. You do not just speak Crip or Blood. You live it as a series of rigid paramilitary protocols that govern everything from how you clean your cell to which side of the yard you walk on. The systemic mechanic here is command and control. The prison serves as the university for the block. An OG in a high-security facility can coordinate a turf war 300 miles away using a series of seemingly innocuous letters. A letter to a cousin about a family reunion isn't a social update. It's a tactical order for a mobilization. The state attempts to intercept these, but the grammar is too fluid. By the time the Department of Corrections identifies a specific phrase as a threat, the frequency has already shifted. The prison acts as a signal booster, refining the raw energy of the street into a disciplined, lethal infrastructure that is then exported back to the block upon a member's release. In a 6 by 9 foot cell, a man known as King Blue sits on his bunk. He hasn't seen the sun in 3 years. He is writing a letter to the guard looking through the slit in the heavy steel door. He is just a man practicing his penmanship. But Blue is executing a linguistic liquidation. He avoids every B in his letter, replacing them with a specific sequence of numbers. He is authorizing a hit on a renegade set that has stopped paying its dues to the main line. His hand moves with the precision of a watchmaker. He knows that a single slip, a B where a number should be, could be interpreted as a sign that he has turned, leading to his own execution in the yard. The stakes of the grammar have never been higher. He is a general in a war of symbols, fighting from a box of concrete and steel. Back on the block, his sister receives the letter. She isn't a player. She works 40 hours a week at a call center. But as she reads the words, she feels the chill of the silent frequency. She recognizes the Wilshire tilt in the writing. She knows that by simply holding this piece of paper, she is an accomplice to a lethal transmission. She wants to burn it, but she knows the grammar requires a response. She is a civilian caught in the carceral pipeline, forced to act as a relay station for a signal she never wanted to hear. The collateral perspective reveals that the prison doesn't just hold the offender. It holds the entire family in a state of linguistic and legal peril. The harsh conclusion is that the American prison system is not a deterrent to the silent frequency. It is its most sophisticated laboratory. By concentrating the most dedicated speakers of the lethal grammar in one place, the state has inadvertently created a think tank for street warfare. The prison doesn't break the code. It hardens it, ensuring that when the signal returns to the street, it is more resilient, more encrypted, and more deadly than ever before. The geography of the block itself is the next layer of the investigation. This is architectural enclosure. We examine how the physical design of urban housing projects serves as a broadcast tower for the frequency. In the 1960s and 70s, many of these complexes were designed with defensible space in mind, a concept meant to allow residents to monitor their own hallways. However, the sets inverted this logic. They turned the narrow stairwells, the high-rise walkways, and the single-entry courtyards into kill zones and observation decks. The architecture of the project dictates the movement of the frequency. A high-rise in Chicago's Robert Taylor homes, before their demolition, allowed a lookout on the 10th floor to see a police cruiser 3 miles away. The silent frequency traveled floor by floor through a series of whistles and slammed doors, a manual internet of warning that moved faster than the squad car. The systemic mechanic is the topographical advantage. The block is not a flat plane. It is a 3-dimensional battlefield. The sets treat the buildings as fortifications. They use the blind spots created by poor lighting and crumbling infrastructure to establish dead zones where the law cannot see. They utilize the choke points, the narrow alleys and one-way streets, to control the flow of traffic and ensure that anyone entering the territory is filtered through a series of visual checkpoints. The architecture doesn't just house the community, it reinforces the code. A police helicopter circles over a complex in North Philly. The searchlight sweeps across the rooftops, but it finds nothing but empty tar. Below, in the shadow spaces, a group of teenagers moves with practiced fluidity. They know the geometry of the block better than the architects who drew it. They navigate a hole in a chain-link fence, a basement window that doesn't lock, and a rooftop ledge that connects two separate buildings. They are the ghost packets of the frequency, moving through the gaps in the state's surveillance. To the pilot in the sky, the buildings are a grid. To the kids on the ground, the buildings are a series of tunnels and escape routes. They aren't running blindly. They are following the tactical map burned into their brains by years of survival. A local bodega owner, an immigrant from Yemen, stands behind his plexiglass shield. He has watched this architectural warfare for 20 years. He has seen the sets reinforce his own storefront with their tags, claiming his business as a landmark in their lethal geography. He knows that if he cleans the graffiti, he is signaling a lack of submission. If he leaves it, he is signaling his complicity to the police. He is a non-player whose very livelihood is defined by the walls around him. He lives in a world where a brick isn't just a building material. It's a canvas for a death threat and a shield against a bullet. The harsh conclusion is that the environment itself is a participant in the war. You cannot fix the silent frequency without tearing down the walls that amplify it. But when the walls come down, as they did with the plan for transformation in Chicago, the frequency doesn't disappear. It just scatters. It moves into the suburbs, into the digital space, and into the smaller, more fragmented blocks of the rural landscape. The architectural enclosure was a cage, but it was also a container. Without it, the lethal grammar becomes an airborne pathogen, infecting territories that previously thought they were immune. We must finally confront the unifying theory of the block. Why does the machine persist? Why, after decades of wars on drugs and gang injunctions and trillions of dollars spent on policing, does the frequency remain so loud? The answer is found in the economic and psychological vacuum. The block is a self-sustaining organism because it provides the only three things that every human being craves: identity, security, and agency. In a world that offers the youth of these neighborhoods nothing but menial labor and systemic indifference, the lethal grammar offers them the chance to be a king, a general, or a soldier. It offers them a language that makes them feel powerful in a world that wants them to be silent. The machine of the block is powered by the validation loop. A 14-year-old stacks in a photo and receives 500 likes. He feels seen. He feels important. He feels like he belongs to something bigger than his crumbling school or his empty refrigerator. This high-speed validation is the fuel of the frequency. The state tries to counter this with fear, but fear is the very currency the street trades in. You cannot scare someone who has already incorporated their own death into their daily grammar. The silent frequency is a response to the social death that precedes the physical one. The block is a closed-loop system. It produces its own culture, its own economy, and its own justice. The lethal grammar is the operating system of this parallel state. It cannot be stopped because it is a rational response to an irrational environment. As long as there is a block, a space defined by its exclusion from the wider society, there will be a silent frequency. The codes will change, the letters will shift, and the sneakers will be replaced by new brands, but the underlying lethal syntax will remain. It is the heartbeat of the American shadow world. As we pan out from the corner, the camera rises above the rooftops, above the architectural enclosure, and above the carceral foundries. We see the city as a map of competing signals, a neon-lit battlefield of BKs and CKs, of bulls and brazies. The silent frequency is not just a subculture. It is a fundamental part of the American story. It is the sound of the unheard, shouting in a language designed to be misunderstood. It is a masterpiece of tragedy, a grammar of the damned. The game continues. The frequency hums on. And somewhere, right now, a young man is tilting his hat, weaving his laces, and preparing his hands to speak. He doesn't know he is a statistic in waiting. He only knows that, for the first time in his life, someone is finally watching. The tale from the block never ends. It just waits for the next person to tune in. The silent frequency is not merely a survival tactic. It is a hereditary condition. This is the blood debt, the intergenerational transmission of the lethal grammar. In the neighborhoods of North St. Louis or the east side of Chicago, the code is not learned in a classroom. It is absorbed through the skin. It is the first language a child hears in the lullabies of a neighborhood under siege. By the time a boy is old enough to tie his own sneakers, he has already learned which colors are safe and which ones are hostile. He has watched his older brothers, his father, and his uncles navigate the world with a specific physical tension. This is the epigenetic signal, a trauma-informed way of moving and speaking that is passed down like a genetic trait. The frequency is the only inheritance the block consistently provides. The systemic mechanic here is linguistic drift. Like any living language, the lethal grammar must evolve to stay ahead of the predator, the state. The signs used by the Roland 60s in 1992 are not the same signs used by the young shiners today. The frequency shifts to bypass the decoders employed by the police. But this drift creates a secondary tragedy, a generational disconnect. The OGs find themselves speaking a dialect that the shorties no longer respect. The elders speak of structure and codes of conduct, while the youth speak a frantic, digitized dialect of clout and crash-out culture. This internal friction within the language itself is where the most volatile violence occurs. It is a civil war of syntax, fought between the keepers of the old frequency and the pioneers of the new, louder broadcast. A man in his late 40s sits on a sagging porch in Liberty City, Miami. He is a legacy speaker, a veteran of the drug wars that scorched the 80s. He watches his 16-year-old nephew across the yard. The boy is filming a video for social media, his hands moving in a blur of cyberstacking. The uncle doesn't recognize half the signs. The grammar has become too fast, too reckless. He sees the boy dissing a set 3 zip codes away, a set the boy has never even seen in person. The uncle wants to speak, to warn him that the silent frequency was meant to be a shield, not a megaphone. But he realizes he no longer has the words. He is a speaker of a dead dialect. The nephew is broadcasting a death warrant to 10,000 people in high definition, and he thinks he's just going viral. Across the street, a social worker watches from her car. To her, the boy's movements look like a developmental disorder, a lack of impulse control. She sees the subversive branding and the orthographic war in his notebooks as a failure of the education system. She doesn't see the strategic intelligence required to master such a complex code. She sees a problem child, where the block sees a high-frequency broadcaster. The collateral perspective reveals the ultimate failure of the outside world. We treat the speakers of the lethal grammar as if they are illiterate, when in reality, they are hyperliterate in a language we are too afraid to learn. We try to teach them English while they are busy mastering the cryptography of survival. The harsh conclusion is that the linguistic ghettoization is now self-perpetuating. The block has developed a cultural immune system that rejects any outside influence. Any attempt to introduce a different language, the language of the straight world, of higher education, of professionalism, is seen as a foreign infection. To speak the other language is to sell out, to act white, or to be a snitch. The frequency is a closed loop that maintains its purity by punishing anyone who tries to tune out. The blood debt ensures that the next generation remains trapped in the same grammar as the last, a cycle of linguistic and physical incarceration that has no exit. This brings us to the unifying theory, the machine of the block. The block is not a place. It is a metabolic process. It is a machine that takes in human potential and converts it into lethal data. The silent frequency is the fuel for this machine. It thrives on the isolation of the ghetto. It feeds on the economic vacuum left by fleeing industries and the psychological void left by failing social structures. The machine is self-repairing because it co-opts the very tools meant to destroy it. It takes the uniform of the state, the prison orange, and turns it into a badge of honor. It takes the surveillance of the police and turns it into a platform for clout. It takes the alphabet of the legal world and turns it into a map of kill zones. The machine persists because it is the only system that offers a total identity. In a world that sees these young men as nothing, the frequency tells them they are everything. It gives them a history, a rank, a purpose, and a language. The game is the only employer that provides a promotion ladder for the discarded. The lethal grammar is the only resume that carries weight in a world without opportunity. This is the economic gravity of the block. It is easier to fall into the frequency than it is to climb out of it. The unifying theory posits that the silent frequency will never stop as long as the signal-to-noise ratio of American life remains so skewed. As long as the noise of poverty and systemic neglect remains the baseline, the signal of the street will remain the only clear voice. The block is a reflection of the society that surrounds it, a society that values branding over being, clout over community, and punishment over prevention. The street has simply taken these American values and pushed them to their most violent, logical extreme. We are looking in a mirror, and we don't like what we see. The tale from the block is a narrative written in the blood of the youth and the tears of the non-players. It is a story told in the staccato rhythm of gunfire and the silent stacking of hands. As we reach the end of this investigation, we must acknowledge the somber reality. There is no off switch for the frequency. We cannot simply program our way out of this paradox. The code is too deep. The history is too long. The debt is too high. We are left on the corner, where the shadows are at their longest. The silent frequency is humming in the air, a low-frequency vibration that you can feel in your teeth. You see a young man walk past, his head down, his hands in his pockets. He isn't saying a word, but if you look at the CK etched into the side of his sneaker, or the way he taps a specific rhythm against his thigh, you realize he is broadcasting a whole world. He is a walking library of tragedy, a living testament to a language that is designed to be his undoing. The game doesn't have winners. It only has survivors and statistics. The lethal grammar is a beautiful, horrific masterpiece of human adaptation, a way of finding meaning in the meaningless. It is the sound of a heart beating in a concrete box. It is the silent frequency, the lethal grammar of the American street, and it is the most honest thing we have ever heard.